Hey guys, Fitness Science here, and we're going to be speaking about fenugreek today, which is a little seed which is common to the Indian subcontinent and used in a lot of their cuisine. And pretty much there's been some research to actually show that it may boost testosterone levels. So I wanted to go through the studies today and tell you whether it was actually legitimate or it was just bullshit. And the theory being that because fenugreek contains dissect, which is a plant steroid, the idea is that if you intake more of a plant steroid, it may actually help with your steroid biosynthesis in men, because it's that framework upon which testosterone can then be synthesized, basically. So having more of the precursor in your actual system may increase testosterone, which I'm going to speak about at the end of the video. But let's actually look at the studies now. So the first study was looking at one of two groups, and it was healthy males from 18 to 35 years old, 60 in total. And they took fenugreek 300 milligrams twice per day, so a total of 600 milligrams of fenugreek, or they just had a group of placebos, and each group undertook resistance training of bench pressing and leg pressing, mainly to get the 1 rep max over 8 weeks. And they actually found that only free testosterone increased in the fenugreek group, not total. So there was some hypothesis in this study that it may inhibit 5-alpha reductase, which converts testosterone to DHT, or it may actually inhibit aromatase as well, which is another enzyme which converts testosterone to estradiol. And the researchers hypothesized that because free testosterone increased but total didn't, maybe it's something to do with that, which to me honestly doesn't sound like a very strong argument, because if that was the case, then you would see DHT increasing. But as I'll get into later, in these studies, DHT hasn't really shifted either, neither has estrogen that much. So I don't really buy that it inhibits 5-alpha reductase or aromatase, even though a lot of the research says that it does. And in terms of strength in this study, it didn't really change too much. There was similar muscle strength increases in both groups that resistance trained, and fenugreek didn't really have much of a benefit in that regard, but it did significantly decrease body fat percentage in all parameters. But the placebo group only significantly decreased their body fat percentage in their skin fold of their chest. The second study was a bit different. They gave participants either placebo or fenugreek of either 300 or 600 milligrams, and this was given to a bigger sample size of men, 138 men between 25 to 47, and roughly 30 in each group. 8 weeks in total, like the study before, and total testosterone only increased by it was significant, but it was a very small amount of increase in testosterone, but only in the 600 milligram group. Whereas the 300 milligram group had no real change, and free testosterone didn't change in any group, and SHBG didn't increase in any group. In fact, it actually increased in the 600 milligram group, and estradiol had a non-significant drop in the 600 milligram group. So could it be that fenugreek is actually stopping aromatase in converting testosterone to estradiol? Potentially. Let's look at the third study, which was in 30 college students who had a previous experience with resistance training. And they split them into two groups, 500 milligrams of placebo or 500 milligrams of fenugreek, and they told them to keep training at 4 days a week over a period of 8 weeks. The training program was 3x10 for weeks 1 to 4, and then for weeks 5 to 8, it was 3 sets of 8 reps. And in terms of training, there were mixed results. Across both groups, there was an increase in both bench press and leg press, so that's probably as a result of the training load. But in terms of hormones, fenugreek had a plus 6.57% increase in total test, plus 12.26% for free test, and a non-significant increase of 26% in estradiol and 6% in DHT. So this idea that it somehow acts as a blocker or inhibitor of aromatase activity and 5-alpha reductase activity doesn't really stack up in this study, because both estradiol and DHT increased in the groups that were taking fenugreek. So again, I don't really buy the idea that it acts as an aromatase inhibitor, because you'd expect to see decrease in both estradiol and DHT, because there'd be no substrate going down that pathway, or less of it. In the fourth study, they took 120 males from 43 to 75 years old, and they actually gave them 600 milligrams of fenugreek over a 12-week period. So this was one of the highest doses in terms of the literature. Now in this study, both free and total testosterone increased significantly, more than placebo, which didn't change really at all. And a lot of the subjective measures, importantly for the males who were on fenugreek in terms of sexual dysfunction, actually improved. So as you can see, their morning erection frequency was a lot higher at week 12 in the fenugreek group, and the sexual frequency in terms of like how often they're having sex basically was a lot higher as well in the fenugreek group at week 12. As you can see here as well, their total scores on the Aging Male Symptom Questionnaire, which a lower score means you have less symptoms. So in the active group, which was the Fenugreek group, this was decreased in almost all subsections of the actual questionnaire, which was very important. But again, these researchers didn't really have a clear-cut mechanism as to why fenugreek seems to increase testosterone. Now, thinking some potential mechanisms might be that LH is increased, or that the pulsatile nature of the Leydig cells themselves is altered in some way with fenugreek, but they didn't really have an answer biologically as to why fenugreek seemed to increase testosterone. And it does seem to increase testosterone because in the 5th study, which included 4 randomized control trials into a systematic review, they actually found that the mean testosterone levels in terms of total is higher in subjects receiving fenugreek. And the final study was looking at sperm counts and fertility across 12 weeks in 50 men who were given 500 milligrams of fenugreek from ages 35 to 65. Here, again, only free testosterone increased. So the total didn't really budge, but the free increased. But in terms of sperm counts, the sperm counts in the men who were taking fenugreek at 4, 8, and 12 weeks were all increased. And also the abnormal sperm morphology was decreased. So pretty much they had more sperm and they were functioning. The actual sperm cells themselves were actually functioning more efficiently. Now, there are a lot of contrasting studies here. Some studies are increasing free testosterone and not total. Some increase total and not free. Some increase both. Now, I don't think it actually acts as an aromatase inhibitor, because if it did, we'd see estradiol significantly decrease in all the studies where men were taking fenugreek. But that's not really true. There wasn't much of a change in any of the studies between the active group and the placebo group in terms of estradiol. In fact, in some studies, estradiol actually increased, and also the claim that it's supposed to block 5-alpha reductase doesn't really stack up either, because again, we'd expect to see a reduction in DHT or dihydrotestosterone as a result of 5-alpha reductase not being able to do its job, which is to convert testosterone to DHT, which is a lot more potent as an anabolic agent. And again, we didn't really see this. In some studies, DHT again actually increased in the active group, and then in other studies it just wasn't changed really at all. So I don't really think it is an AI or a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor. I think it's more to do with the fact that fenugreek actually contains diosgenin, and we know diosgenin is actually a really potent plant steroid. And if you look at the chemical structure, it is very, very similar to a precursor in biosynthesis of testosterone in males, which is called DHEA. Now, DHEA is basically a precursor for testosterone synthesis in men. Now, DHEA is very important in the male human body because it essentially serves as the backbone for testosterone production. And I think, given all the research, I honestly believe that diosgenin is a really potent plant steroid, and that's the reason for the increase in testosterone. It's not because it's blocking aromatase activity or 5-alpha reductase activity, it's because it's a steroid and it allows your human body to synthesize more testosterone. So in a way, it almost acts like a pro-hormone in that because there's more of the substrate there, it can then downstream affect all the other hormones. And the main one in men is testosterone. More substrate at the beginning of the pathway essentially means more testosterone at the end being synthesized, pretty much. Now, for dosing, I'd stick to what the studies have said, about 300 to 500 milligrams of fenugreek daily. Now, for safety studies in rats, for those of you concerned out there, they've given rats up to 35 milligrams per kilogram of fenugreek per day, and this was over a 4-week period. Now, that would be the equivalent of giving an 80 kilogram male 2.8 grams of fenugreek per day, which is way beyond what I'm recommending here of about 300 to 500. And there were no serious changes in the histopathology of their testes, so they actually sacrificed the rats, had a look at their testes, the actual tissue of their testes under a microscope, and no real changes there, unlike Fedosia agrestis, where there were significant changes, as I speak about in this video. But yeah, so it seems to be, safe. I caution to use the word safe only because 4 weeks probably isn't a long enough time frame, but it was a considerable dose that they gave to the rats. So, no human in their right mind is going to be taking 2.8 grams of fenugreek a day. So, I think it should be relatively safe given the research. One thing that probably needs to be done is just a longer time period of fenugreek study. So the longest study duration was only like 12 weeks in these studies that I've presented here. So realistically, it would be nice to see a human trial that went for longer than 12 weeks, potentially even 6 months or 12 months. So yeah, that's Fenugreek, guys. Thank you so much for the support. I will see you in the next video. And this is all about providing you guys the research and the science in order to just make more informed decisions and actually, you know, take supplements that are backed by science rather than just people wanting to make money off you. I'm trying to save you guys money, and I'm trying to just get away from the marketing and bullshit in the fitness industry that is unfortunately far too common. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Fitness Science signing out.